work it out. And here is the eventual structure of DNA that they discovered. Now, Crick, Watson, and Wilkins won the Nobel Prize in 1961 for their discovery of the structure of DNA. It was not until later that Franklin's important contributions were recognized. Crick, Watson, and Wilkins kind of took all the glory for themselves, and they used the woman and didn't properly credit her. As an interesting side point, Franklin's work with X-ray photography, which itself was a continuation of somebody else's work, resulted in a second Nobel Prize for Klug in chemistry. If Franklin had lived a long life and was still alive in 1982, Nobel Prizes, incidentally, are only given to people who are still alive. So it is unknown whether she would have won in 1961 because she'd already died. She died in 1958. But if she'd lived a long life, and if she had been given the proper credit that she deserves, then Rosalind Franklin might have been only the second person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences. Sadly, though, Rosalind Franklin died when she was very young in 1958 and died not having received the credit that she deserved. And this actually links in to the way that old-fashioned narratives are developed and also how they perpetuate themselves. So I mentioned already this book, Men of Mathematics. So this is an actual quote from the book. 2 criteria have been applied in selecting names for inclusion: the importance for modern mathematics of a man's work and the human appeal of the man's life and character. Now, you've all been doing lots of work on paraphrasing. So I've paraphrased this into more modern English. 3 criteria have been applied in selecting mathematicians: the importance of their work for modern maths, the appeal of their lives, and whether or not they have a penis. So, Europe 100 years ago was a sexist place. Women were denied access to education, and they were often denied a role in either academic or professional life. To an extent, when Bell wrote his Men of Mathematics, very few women had made a contribution to maths, and that's mainly because they did not take part in the education and the academic practice, and that's because they were denied. But also, in the way that the narrative is constructed, you can see that someone like Bell actually ignored contributions of women. And I can pick out a woman who definitely should have been in his book. So, Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace lived in the 19th century. She was a mathematician. There is this that you see here. This is a mechanical computer invented by Charles Babbage. Ada Lovelace wrote the first programs that made this mechanical computer run. So, Ada Lovelace was the world's first computer program. I'll say that again, the world's first ever computer programmer was a woman. We talk about Isaac Newton as the father of science. We could also talk about Lovelace as the mother of computer programming, but we don't, and that's slightly problematic, I think. Now, Ada Lovelace was in quite a privileged position. She was the daughter of a lord, Lord Byron, a famous poet, and she also married a lord. Because of that, she had access to books and knowledge and learning, and was also able to move in the same circles as other mathematicians and scientists and discuss her ideas. So what Ada Lovelace shows is that given access to education, a woman can do just as well as a man. And this is going back to the 19th century. So Ada Lovelace here is someone that we should really celebrate. So staying with the subject of computers, I'm going to talk about one more person now, Alan Turing. So Alan Turing was a great mathematician who lived in the 20th century in the UK. And he built the first modern computer. He built this first modern computer in response to a need. During the Second World War, Britain and America were fighting the Nazis under Hitler. And the Nazis were using a particular code called Enigma. Turing was able to build a computer that cracked the Enigma code. It helped to understand in advance what the Nazis were doing. So, what did Alan Turing do? Well, he kind of invented computers and helped win the Second World War, defeating Hitler. This guy is an absolute hero. He's a legend. However, Alan Turing was gay. And going back to the 1940s, the 1950s, being homosexual was a crime. You could actually go to jail for having same-sex relations. Alan Turing was actually prosecuted for homosexuality, and rather than go to jail, he was given horrible chemicals to cure him of being gay. And in the end, he committed suicide. There is an excellent film about the life of Alan Turing, which is called The Imitation Game. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to watch it. So Alan Turing was gay, and at the time that he lived, being gay was considered a crime. Thankfully, in the UK today, homosexuality is no longer a crime. And we as a country are making great steps to be much more inclusive of LGBT people. This lanyard that I'm wearing, this is actually a symbol of the University of Sheffield's commitment to making sure that the university is a safe space for all people, regardless of their sexual orientation. There are still societies around the world today that do consider homosexuality to be wrong or evil or illegal. And very often, the reasons that people give for homosexuality to be illegal or whatever is they say it's unnatural. On that point, they are wrong, literally wrong. So, if we look around animal species, you'll find all around the natural world, animals engage in same-sex coupling. You can see here the giraffes, male giraffes, they like to rub necks with each other, and this is clearly sexual. Dolphins, it's been observed that some male dolphins form same-sex couples, and they mate for life. They stay with each other for life. Sheep, 1 in 10 male sheep are gay. It's just how it is. These are bonobos. Now, female bonobos will mate with male bonobos to have children, but all female bonobos have sex with other female bonobos. It's what they do. Penguins. There's a lovely story about two penguins who were actually in a zoo, and the two male penguins, they formed a same-sex couple, and they were looking after rocks like they were looking after eggs. And so the zookeepers, they actually gave these two male penguins an egg to look after, and they raised it. They successfully raised it as a happy family of a little baby penguin and two daddy penguins. So, same-sex coupling exists all around the natural world, in all animal species and in humans. Because of that, same-sex coupling or homosexuality, however you want to call it, is natural. It is by definition of the word natural. So, that's the end of the lecture. So, in conclusion then, European scientific revolution relied on knowledge from the whole world. And so history that only talks of Europe is Eurocentric, which is possibly racist. The way that narratives are written, if historians either accidentally or deliberately ignore the work of people from elsewhere around the world, then they are helping to perpetuate racism. If it's the idea that only Europeans can do maths, then that sends a message to non-Europeans. It's like saying, yeah, you can't do maths, we can, which is not the case. This same principle is also apparent in the way that women are talked about in the history of science. Now, women were often excluded from science because of a society thing to do with their access to education. So we see that it has been difficult for women to actually have a role in science, often because they are denied access to education. But then if they're excluded from the narratives, this creates a different problem. Imagine a girl interested in science, looking for role models, someone that can say to her, yes, a woman can be a scientist. You could look at people like Rosalind Franklin and Ada Lovelace and be inspired. But if they are excluded from the narrative, if they are not included in the book, if they are kind of written out of the history, then that is helping to perpetuate an idea that that girls can't do science, which just simply isn't the case. And that kind of way of writing about history and talking about history is sexist, and it perpetuates sexism. When we look at the historical narratives of the past, we can see how they reflect society, how the racism and sexism in Europe of 100 or more years ago is actually shown in the way that history was written about. And this is why they need to be challenged, because the historical narratives perpetuate society's beliefs. Somebody can go and find an old book and read it and think that the only people who have made a contribution to science in the whole world are white men with beards. And that's a very problematic thing. So we need to challenge this, and we need to show through writing new narratives that that scientific inquiry is actually something that can be done by all people around the world, regardless of their identity, whether they're male or female, the colour of their skin, or their sexual orientation. And I think that this is a very important message which needs to be spread. That's the end of the lecture. You can see a few set of references there, and I hope that this is something stimulating to talk about in your seminar later.